Alright, this is Yalak again. It's January 19th, 2017, and my title here is Snake Gods. Snake Gods. So I'm going to be talking about snakes, and this is another lesson building up on the other lesson I did with the Chihuahua God maybe a week or so ago, where I showed that the gods of the earth are just made up. Right? Because the Most High said time and time again, He's the only God, right? He's the only power. So man actually made up their own gods, right? That's why the Most High doesn't have any respect for them, because they're not real gods. They're not any competition for Him. But we know, of course, that man has been allowed a certain amount of time to live his life the way he chooses, and is expected to choose the right path, to do the right thing. But that time will eventually come to an end. But in the meantime, he does all these cruel and wicked things, and he makes up all these gods. So here with snake gods, I just want to show how, as in the Chihuahua video, that African god, I just want to show here again how the gods started up in ancient times. And the reason why I'm doing this is because when I was in Christianity, there was all this massive talk about Satan, 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 and they indoctrinate you with the Christian teachings to thinking that all the pagan gods from so-called pagan times, even though pagan is more of a more later word than in, way back in ancient times, they make you feel like in the New Testament / Christian world that paganism is gone. And so now today we're just dealing with Satan, right? This creature, or this fallen angel, I should say, and he's just the main one you're fighting. When the reality is that the gods that men made from very long ago, from real ancient times, are the gods that are still operating in the world, because they set them up. And I showed in the video last time that they put them right in your lives, because you won't go to an ancient temple. Most of us, some of us still do, but most people, especially in North American societies, won't go to a temple to worship a god named Chihuahua, like I mentioned, or some other Hindu type god, or Eastern type god, and so on. Some scary looking figures that look like they're a cross between an elephant, a rhinoceros, a snake, a bird, an eagle, and 15 other animals blended into one being or one statue. You won't do that. You'll have nightmares, right? Your children don't have to have the nightmares. You'll have the nightmares yourself, because some of these things are so damn ugly, right? I don't know how people go into these temples and worship these things and actually feel comfortable sitting there with these ugly statues with all candles lit around them and so on. Anyway, most of us won't go and associate with that kind of stuff, especially if you work in some nice fancy building, right? And you have on some nice clothes and whatever, and some whatever. You're not going to be into that stuff, right? You just want your modern music so you can shake your butt and so on, and drink wine and get drunk and whatever. So since you won't do that, then they put the gods in your face. It's on your symbols everywhere you go, on the streets, in the pharmacy, and the hospital, in your schools, in your cars. And I showed that even the names of a lot of these cars are the names of actual gods that were worshipped in ancient times. So they bring the gods to you. Since you won't actively go and pursue the gods, then the gods pursue you, and you don't know you're living in a pagan world still. So the Christian teachings let me think that pagan world is gone, and people aren't like that when they see all this stuff in the New Testament. Oh, it's just back then, and now it's just Jesus and Satan. It's not even God and Satan anymore. It's mainly Jesus and Satan, right? But I'm showing here how man created the gods, and the gods are still around, right? So let's look at where some more of these gods come from. I'm dealing with snake gods today, and I want to read here, starting out from the well-known passage in Genesis, after the creation story about the serpent. From Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Most High Power had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath the Most High said, and he said unto the woman, Yea, hath Elohim said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And she responded, and so on, right? I don't want that, so I'll run down to verse 14. And the Most High said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Alright, so the text here is saying to me that this creature that we were taught is Satan, although the word Satan came in later and is a more recent use in scripture than we think. And keep in mind, the word Satan was just mentioned barely in the Old Testament, but he seems to take prominence in the New Testament. But they tell you, yeah, Satan is this fallen angel and so on, right? And when I read this, it's telling me that this serpent is not actually, well, it doesn't seem to me to be a fallen angel, and it doesn't seem to me to be an actual physical serpent, right? Nothing is saying here that Satan possessed the serpent, and it doesn't give me any indication that this is an angel that fell. Although I am aware that a lot of people say that, and some people whose lessons and teachings I like, they say that, right? Just like them, they're free to say their stuff. I'm free to say mine as well, and I'm showing you what I think about it, right? For me, this serpent, while I won't deal with it fully here, this serpent to me is talking about people, or at least a person, right? From the nations that are around, which gets me in hot water now, even though I'm still not going to deal with it now. Because you're going to say, well, which other nations were there? It was just Adam and Eve. But the more I studied, the more I read, I learned that people are saying we were here for more than 6,000 years. And I have tried passionately and desperately to hold on to the 6,000 year number. But the more I study, the more I read, the more I hear people talk about it and give the reasons on both sides that I listen to, I'm starting to see that they're finding things that just seem to indicate that there's more than 6,000 years of history going on here on the earth, right? That's what it seems to me. Now, I'm not one to go and say like we were here for like 250,000 years or 15 million years and some real high numbers like that. No, I'm starting to think that maybe just a couple more thousand years, right? Than the 6, maybe 2 or 3 more years, maybe 10. I mean, I really can't put a number to it because I haven't studied the issue of the timing yet. But I just hear things and I just kind of get a feeling for something. But I see some things they're finding now, ancient cities buried here and there, and even under Indian oceans in India and so on, going up to at least about 10,000 years old. So I kind of go with maybe we've been around for at least 10,000 years. That's what I'm thinking, right? But these are just my thoughts with the dating, right? I can't say I believe that yet. It might well be 6,000, but it's just seeming to me like it might be a little bit more. So I continue to read and look into that as time goes on. But if that's the case, then it's more than 6,000 years. It would seem to me like there's some other people around, right? Because the Genesis story with the Eden even mentions Assyria, and Ethiopia. And when you look at that, like, I mean, the way it's talking about, and these people in Ethiopia, Nubia, and so on, they're telling you that these real ancient people um, are claiming to have been around for much longer than 6,000 years, right? And they're coming out with what they call proof, more and more, that's really showing that, right? According to their findings. So, if that's the case, it may well be that Ethiopia was up and running already, and possibly Assyria, right? And when I consider other things in the scriptures, what's talked about of the trees being nations and so on, I just get the sense that maybe Assyria and Ethiopia was up and running at some point, right? When all this was going on with the creation story, right? Um, I mean, why call these empires or these nations by name at the time of the creation when there was no one living there? But then someone could say, well, the writer is just putting that in because by the time these things are being penned, those nations or empires were now known. So, so yes, you can say that as well. But it just seems to me that the the very expert way that information has been lost on the earth kind of suggests that maybe more time has transpired on the earth that gave um, uh, more ability for things to be hidden. Like, you understand, if something just happened 10 years ago all over the earth, it's it's a little bit more difficult to go all over the earth within 10 years and hide it from just about every nation on the earth, right? Um, and cause everyone to shut up. But if you have many, many more thousands of years where things had time to be covered up by the ruling elites of the earth, the kings of the earth, many, many thousands of years have transpired, then you can go around the earth with these different nations that work together to hide these things better. And you notice what they do. If you look in history, and it's happening even today, um, now I just read something from Twitter last night of someone showing how, and gee, I can't remember the the place now, but there's a certain community that the modern Israeli government is now gonna wipe them out and relocate whoever is left to someplace else to build a new Jewish village or a new Jewish city, right? And so if you look at it, it seems to me that all peoples of the earth have been, in all nations, have been attacked by the ruling elites, um, systematically, carefully, and strategically, and killed, and the rest who survived are relocated to different lands. And those who are allowed to remain in the land that was taken over and wiped out are usually the ones who don't have much education, right? Where the smart people, the wiser people, and the business people, and so on, and the money people are either relocated, they're bought out, they're threatened, or they're just outright killed. And the ones that are left are the ones with menial jobs, peasants, and so on, who don't have much education, can't read, don't know the language very well, or can speak their language but cannot write it, right? And so they're more limited in the passing on of information. And so can't spread their information about what happened to their people, because since they can't write, they can't publish books to let the rest of the world get it and find out this information. So they live and stay there, they stay old and die there, and it dies with them. The little they pass on to their children gets watered down because, with each generation, less and less is passed down, right? As more new information gets filtered into the children that are growing up. And so what you find is that less information comes on, right? So if you have many more thousands of years, you can pull off those things so that by the time we get to 2017 now, this Gentile year, although the real Hebrew year is going to come in about the spring, um, if you have many more thousands of years, you can do all these things and hide more information, right? And so after when you look across the earth in the different empires, um, go everywhere, Persia, China, this whole American deal over here in North America, South America, everywhere you go, ancient Egypt, even to modern Egypt, Bedouins pushed here and there, real ancient Egyptians pushed over here into deserts or mountains. And, what about the real, excuse me, Sumerians, Um, and you got real Egyptians claiming to be the real Egyptians today, and they're never shown on TV or in documentaries. But you find the so-called modern Egyptians, right? And so what you find is that the real ancient peoples have been killed and wiped out, and a little that survive are pushed into areas where people don't normally go, and you don't have much access to them, right? You don't have much roads and modern infrastructure there to connect with them. And that's why you get people who are researchers, when they go and they put their money and time into finding these things, they publish books because little was known to us, right? So the elites of the world pass on a directive to their successors to have them continue to torture, maim, wipe out, and remove people from their lands, to disconnect them from their lands and from their cultures and from their history. And you have to think as well, not only are they being disconnected from their own history by being moved and killed, but while they cannot talk properly about their own history now, they also cannot talk about the history of the Hebrews of ancient Israel. Don't you think it is strange that there are so many documentaries on TV about ancient Egypt, but the biggest best-selling book in the world, what you call the Bible today, talks so much about Israel alongside Egypt, and documentaries after documentaries talk about Egypt, but you hardly ever see anything about Israel in a documentary, about the ancient Hebrews in a documentary. How can Egypt have Israel all around it and the Hebrews all around it and Abraham all up in it and Joseph and all these guys from the past? And so many documentaries are made, and if you go in the libraries, you can find all kinds of books and documentaries on ancient Egypt and their culture, their arts, their pottery, and everything like that, and their worship system. But you never see them giving massive amount of time to the ancient Hebrews who had the same color skin like them and so on, right? I, I mean, come on. So someone is going around systematically destroying information, and where they cannot fully destroy it in certain areas and at certain points in time, they then lessen it by hiding it and so on, and threatening those who survive. So if you have more thousands of years like that, it seems to me more credible an idea that you have more time to hide all this information. Because if all this stuff, big wars and so on, happened only 10 years ago, more of us would still be alive to learn a bit. But if it happened a longer time ago, you got more time to hide this stuff, right? So when you look at this snake stuff now, it seems to me that there might really have been some ancient nations around, right? That was there at the time when Adam was set up, Adam and Eve. Adam was a ruler. Whatever you want to call him, if you want to call him well, I probably wouldn't call him a politician, but he was a ruler, right? Like some say he was a king or whatever, right? However you want to say it is up to you, but he was a ruler because he ruled in the garden, right? And I think somewhere, whether in the Bible or in the regular Bible that we read or in the Apocrypha, it says he was Lord over all God's creatures. So he was ruling. Now let me ask you something. The story of Noah having the animals come unto him to go into the ark is kind of similar to Adam naming all the animals. Now, if Adam is just one single man, and the Most High, as we know today, have made all kinds of animals and different species and subspecies and whatever, in different family groups of animals. I mean, there's just so many, and sometimes you see a little bug creeping on your desk or on the floor, and you never realize it because it's so small. So the Most High has made just like tons and tons and tons of creatures. And Adam has to name all those by himself. Now, how long did Adam live in order to do that? You think Adam was just 100 years old until his children came and those were already all named? And it never says he was tired. Maybe he was not tired like that, or they didn't show some exhaustion or whatever. Because now, if you have to name as one single person before your wife even comes along, whether she's named Eve or Mary, if you have to name thousands and thousands or millions of creatures before somebody comes along to help you as a helpmeet, and you're doing it all on your own, are you going to have a child in 50 years or 100 years? Name Cain or Abel or so? Or are you going to be so exhausted, right? But you notice the Most High was concerned about Adam's aloneness, not his tiredness, as if he was working overtime to do this all alone, to name all these creatures all alone. Either Adam had some help, or he was ruling and other people were doing these things and bringing it to them, like the Bible says later, these other kings of the earth, when Israel is restored, they're going to do the work and their kings are going to bring their gold and their wealth and so on to Israel, so that Israel is going to have the riches but don't do all the work on their own, because we've worked as slaves in different empires for thousands of years. So either Adam had some people doing other work, and while coming to him in the garden, they decided the glory that he has they want, or the mystery in the garden they want, the part of that to see where Adam's getting his power from. So they want to take him down so they can get access to the tree or whatever, right? That's all supposition. Yeah, I know. But either something like that is happening, or Adam had some supernatural kind of power or ability, as some say, in order to pull off the naming of all these creatures before Eve came. Because certainly Adam, the Most High's concern was not about Adam's tiredness, but his aloneness. So he made a woman to treat the man's problem, which was aloneness. Adam wasn't struggling with tiredness, it seems. All right, so now when you look at Adam here doing all this stuff, if he has to name all these millions and millions of creatures, how does he pull that off? And he must have been a great swimmer then, to name all these animals, but then to go into the sea and name all those creatures in the water, some of which we are still searching for and trying to identify, and every now and then they say, oh, we found a new sea creature, we found a new kind of fish. You got fish, they say, who live so low that sunlight doesn't reach them, and they get their oxygen from plants down there, something like that. Some fish, they say, I guess, don't even have eyes. They just sense their way around by electricity, electrical fields or whatever, right? So you're telling me Adam dove and went all down into the depths of the sea, where sunlight doesn't even reach, and can see even though he doesn't have sunlight to get down there to name all those creatures. And you're telling me something is not strange about this story? That Adam named all the creatures? You still got places and jungles on earth that are so dangerous. Not only can you not go there because of the tribes that are uncontacted, they say, but also because of just the terrain is kind of difficult to travel there, but also because of the dangerous venomous wasps and other kinds of creatures, that some of them look, some frogs or some other kind of small creatures that look so colorful and friendly and nice based on their color, but they are poisonously deadly. And Adam goes by himself into all these areas and names all these creatures and doesn't die, or doesn't get scared, or doesn't whatever. So the Most High is never concerned that he's scared. He's going all these dangerous places. He might slip and fall from whatever, right? Crossing all these ravines and these whatever into all these places, right? I mean, come on. I'm just asking people just to think, right? Because the reason why I'm doing this video and these videos about the ancient gods is because I'm slowly building up to saying some other stuff about scripture, that sometimes we're believing some things that are not really the way the Most High made them and said them, but the scribes corrupted some stuff. And if we don't have if we don't unlearn the lies from the start, the deception from the start, we'll have difficulty in understanding some things that are later spoken of when Israel is up and running in Scripture. All right, so now, I mean, what do we do with this story here with Adam? Anyway, it says that the serpent came and was talking. Now, here's why. Maybe I can prove that. Although it says Ethiopia, a river ran by Ethiopia, and there was Assyria, maybe I can prove that these kingdoms were up and running, although it seems likely to some people and it's starting to be of interest to me. But at least I think I can show here that this snake or this serpent was not a physical serpent. That Christian thinking lets you think that this was Satan, and I think this was a person, right? This might well have been a person, or just some kind of, just some kind of a way of referring, like symbolically to something that's going on at the time, to the way the whole temptation happened, right? So, but let's show that it's not a physical serpent, according to how I see it, at least. You will do your own studies and consider the things I say here, and I hope it's helpful to you. And I hope some people help me. People have been great in helping me with different things, right? Even some people who don't agree with some of my things, by the things that they share with me, is very, very helpful. So, hey, it goes both ways. Now, if I look here from twoletterlookup.com, from the word serpent, Nakash, a snake, from Strong's 5175. It says serpent, snake, serpent, image of serpent, flying serpent in a mythological sense, right? And then if you go up, hold on. Yeah, so if you look at that some more now, it's saying the origin of this word serpent or snake is from 5175, but it's saying the origin is from 5172. Nakash, again, but it's got some more information to it, right? It says to practice, and here now it says, like the 5175 talking about the serpent, says it's a noun, a masculine noun, right? And we know a noun is more like a name, right? It's designating something. But now the origin that is from 5172, a verb, and a verb is like a doing word, right? And it says it's a primitive root for this word nakash, and it says it means to, or it deals with to practice divination. It says divine, observe signs, learn by experience, diligently observe, practice fortune telling, take as an omen, right? To observe signs and omens, right? And it talks about enchanter and enchantment and so on. And I think in the last lesson with the Chihuahua god, I talked about how they were observing signs as well, right? Now, this is why I don't think this serpent was a physical serpent, because it's telling you that this snake from 5175 that they're talking about, they have used the word snake because it comes from a root that means to practice divination and observe signs and to learn by experience and so on, right? Fortune telling, which means basically it's like the other words in scripture that the Most High used to curse certain people, like of the Canaanites and other evil people who are doing things like witchcraft, and necromancy, and what's the other word I'm looking for now? Whatever, I can't remember now, but we know snakes don't practice divination and observe signs like in the skies for worshipful um, practices, right? Like observing stars and so on, or staring at flames to use the flame and the trance and meditation of looking at flames for religious purposes, for getting trances and so on, right? And snakes do not practice fortune telling, people. So this serpent here in the garden, to me, means that people, or at least a person, possibly from one of the other nations that were around, as I was hinting at before, thinking that people, my thought is that they came from someplace in India, because India has so much of this stuff, right, with snakes and so on, and fortune telling, and all these gurus and babas, right? So some kind of India slash Kushite kind of worship, right? And we know that the Kushites, they were over there in India, set up themselves over there too, right? But this serpent then means to me that at least one person who was like a guru or a baba, or a shaman, some person like that. There's another word that I have that I can't recall now, but it speaks of an ascended master, right? And we know those are kind of terms that you find in these Hindu type religions, which all this Buddhism and Hinduism is really, they're just really later religions, because the real religions that they were using were scrapped by the elites of the earth, and they put in the later forms of Hinduism and Buddhism, right? To give you the watered down version that hides the real religion that was there first, so that you cannot easily connect with that which was there first, because you must always be in doubt. So you don't know the true history. But as time goes on, more people are digging and finding, and the Most High is helping us all to find it, right? To find out more things that happened in ancient times. So, since snakes do not practice divination, then I'm led to think that the people that the Most High cursed in scriptures, the evil people, whichever nation they're from, right? I'm led to think that these are the kinds of people that might fit into this picture here, right? And so what you find is that someone who was practicing fortune telling was using a snake as a religious symbol. Someone who was practicing divination and observing signs and making calendars and so on, they were practicing divination and doing these things, right? And were using the snake as, or serpent as their religious symbol, as a part of their myth. So then you can find that myth or religious symbol coming into the story in the garden, to say that a serpent, when that serpent actually means someone who hated what was going on, came in to tempt the people in the garden to damage what the Most High was doing, and to damage the people that were in the garden. Like other nations enticed Israel with their practices and their rituals and their gods, right, and took down Israel. Someone didn't like what was going on, and could it be that maybe if some of these people from these other countries, like maybe, like I said, ancient Kushites, we know they worshipped all these many other gods, right? But either from there, from Kush, called Ethiopia in the Bible, or the Assyrians, as Assyria was mentioned in with the river going by Eden as well. And the Assyrians were vicious, terrible, evil people in ancient times, and they were spoken of early in creation and later on in judgment at the end of the world, if you read even Isaiah and so on, right? So if someone from these nations was there doing these kind of things, and we knew they did these things, then they could have been tempting, right? But these are just my thoughts, right? I mean, you deal with it however you want and see. But at least I would have said enough to let you see that it is difficult for me to accept that this was a physical serpent. And since nothing is said of a falling angel, although some experts will tell you that this actually is speaking of a fallen angel, but that can be dealt with. I'm going to deal with fallen angels one day. I'm just building up. I'm not ready for that yet. But I have some interesting thoughts as well. So anyway, I just showed though that this cannot, you might still say, okay, fallen angel is somewhere here, but at least this shows that this is not a physical serpent. So for all these Christian thinkers, like, just hush it. Serpents do not practice divination. They do not practice fortune telling, right? But people practice fortune telling. Now, if and here the curse too on the serpent, that it's gonna go on your belly, right? Upon your belly you will go, and so on, right? That means this thing they're saying is slithering, right? Now, if you look at slither, and you'll say, yeah, well, see, it's a physical serpent then because it's slithering, right? If you look at slither here from etymology dictionary online, early 15th century, and every time I read these things, early 15th century, early 15th century, early 13th century, early, it's like we have been so systematically cut off from ancient knowledge, like I said, because why isn't it like earlier than 15th century for some of these different words that we look up when we study, or 16th century, so on? It seems like since the time of more recent conquest, more of these words are coming from the Latin, right? And from, I don't know. How about just giving us words that come directly from some ancient Sumerian or Hebrew language or Aramaic language words, right? But you're getting all these more Old English and recent type of words, right, to describe more ancient things that were there, that were being talked about before these later languages came along. But anyway, early 15th century variant of Middle English slither, which means to slip or to slide, right? To slide on a loose slope. So basically, it's saying, it basically means, slither means to walk in a sliding manner, right? So you say, okay, well, the serpent, yeah, it was slithering, right? That's a sliding manner. He slides on the ground, so he slithers, right? So it could have been a real serpent that's going now in a slithering kind of movement. But all that, since I proved that serpents do not do fortune telling, it cannot mean that there was a physical serpent that was going on its belly to slither. It would more mean that the nations who would have then fell from glory in the past and are doing all these wars now to regain, like ancient, or whatever, right? They just simply lost their status and had now fallen down, just like even Adam himself and Eve lost their status and fell down, right? So that's just my quick thought on that. Slither, to walk with a sliding or shuffling gait, to slip and slide on even surface, and so on. Okay, if I go to answers@yahoo.com, this person here is saying, I think it's really a story about how snakes lost their legs. That's what they're saying. And as I looked up this, I found even four-legged snakes. And all they're talking about, these four-legged snakes, is just guessing, right? Fossils found, and it's always just fossils, and they can't prove anything, right? A story about how snakes lost their legs. There is no devil here. So even this person is saying there's no devil there. It's kind of an important detail. Wouldn't it plainly say the devil possessed the snake or something of the sort? I guess they're saying if the devil was really around, or Satan was really around, wouldn't it say that he possessed the snake? So they're saying just because the devil is called a serpent once in Revelations, the book of Revelation, doesn't make every snake a devil. Like Jesus called Peter a snake once. Does that mean Peter is Satan? So again, you see, here somebody is kind of giving some light on this by their own thoughts too, right? To say what I was trying to express, that if the serpent was really Satan just because it is called a serpent, then is Peter Satan just because he is called that as well, right? Called Satan. And then, yeah, so anyway, now if we look here from, how do I say this word now? This website name, Bibliothèque Pleiades.net. I'm not going to bother spelling this for you, but if you look up this title, The Serpent Code, The Sacred Past of Serpent Worshippers by Philip Gardiner, then you should find this article, right, talking about serpent worship. And so I'm showing now that this wasn't a real serpent, but there was some serpent worship going on in ancient times, right? And I mentioned a long time ago that I found a website showing some ancient information about Canada, because so little is said about Canada, right? In a part of Canada that I've hardly even heard of. And I saved the picture and the website. I got to find it one day to bring it out. Showing that long time ago, like Augustine, who was the biggest, what do I call him now, literary person writing about Christianity, himself had said that Christianity with his Hebrew Jesus, to put in my own words, I'm adding in Hebrew Jesus, but he said this whole cross thing about Christianity and dying on the cross is not a new thing with Jesus coming and dying in AD 33. He said Christianity is an ancient religion from ancient times. And I've pointed out in my New Testament is Fake series that this whole Christianity and dying on the cross stuff is an ancient thing. It's an ancient religion that gets changed through different empires over time, right? And it's shown in its different forms. And so by the time you come to the New Testament, they now use a Hebrew Jesus to pull it off, but no Hebrew Messiah actually died at that time, right? It's an ancient religion, right? And I've pointed out so many times that the Hebrews would not have run from their own Messiah, which precept shows that Hebrews in large numbers as a nation ran from a Messiah that came to deliver them. Did they run from Cyrus, and did they run from Moses when he came to deliver them? Hebrews did not run as a nation. Judah did not run. Israel did not run from their saviors. Did Israel run from Samson and the other judges that was set up to deliver them from the other nations that enslaved them because they were cursed for following after idolatry and so on? No. There's no precept of the entire nation or most of the nation of Israel or of Judah running from their Savior. But all of a sudden we get to New Testament times and Jesus the Messiah comes and he decides to add in some Gentiles, and then they run from the Jesus Messiah message. They run into Atlas Mountains and wherever they ran into Africa, right? They ran from it when the Romans were slaughtering, right? But the Christians now, who are the pagans whose religion it really is from ancient times, and they're now finally getting the chance to establish it in a much larger way, are protected by the Romans and are given the chance, as I've shown before, to get out of the way and hide in a place called Pella, supposedly, to get out of the way and stay in safety while the Hebrews are destroyed. And the Romans waited until the Christians from their Roman Christian government religion are gotten out of the way. The Romans waited until the Christians are removed out of the way so that they could then go and slaughter in a dedicated and focused manner the Hebrews who did not want this so-called Hebrew Messiah who died on a cross for their sins. Because Rome did not want to destroy the Christians who were going to make their religion of Christianity with a Messiah on a cross dying. They would not ruin that because that was what was going to make them grow. But the Hebrews who had nothing to do with a Messiah on a cross, they fled because they were being slaughtered. Right? And the same Hebrew Christ on a cross is the same kind of Savior on a cross that we've seen in different religions dying in different ways, right? Now, the serpent from this website I just mentioned, the Serpent Code, the Sacred Past of Serpent Worshippers. From this website, it's talking about Ireland, St. Patrick, and the pests. Listen to this. Ireland once infested with snakes. Ireland was once infested with snakes. So say the Christian stories of St. Patrick, who supposedly expelled them with his Bacillum Jesu, or staff of Jesus. Of course, Ireland has no indigenous snakes at all, and so he must have been speaking of it symbolically. But to what was he referring? So symbolically, right, referring to the snakes, right? So that's what I'm saying here with the Genesis story. That snake is just a symbol of something else, of some myth from other nations. And when you go and do your own searches, you will find other nations and tribes and villages and groups of people in ancient times, which would have been probably ancient times of Adam and Eve of the Garden of Eden, or shortly after, if they did not exist at that time, because I said I was just guessing at that, I don't know, but it seems more likely to me the more I study. But symbolically speaking of their serpent worship, right? And when you look at these different nations, you find all over India and Kushite areas, Kushite lands and Africa and so on, that people were worshipping serpents or snakes as a part of their different religions. Different religions, right, use snakes, right? And so symbolically, the serpent is referring to that. So when you see a serpent being mentioned from ancient times, such as the Garden of Eden, what it's telling you is that there was a religious, mythological, or religious symbol used in the Garden of Eden story, or in the Adam and Eve story, that's telling you that there was already a religion that was set up that was using the serpent as a religious symbol. That now lets me understand that there was religion on the earth at the time that Adam and Eve was living, or shortly after. But if I go by just what the story is saying, the way it's written in the Genesis story, I would have to conclude that there was a religion operating at the time when Adam and Eve was in the garden. And so then the Most High, not wanting anything to do with these other nations, possibly, as different places in Isaiah and Ezekiel talks about the nations being identified as trees and so on, trees in the garden are like nations, it could be then that the Garden of Eden, while it would have some physical trees, because we know we get food to eat from trees, is also using a play on words to talk about the different nations that were around. And so they had their symbols like serpents and eagles and double-headed eagles and swastikas and other symbols as they worshiped their Baal figures and idols and so on. They had their symbols there and their religions. So these nations, looking at what was going on in the garden as the Most High set up this man Adam in the garden, just like he set up Israel as his garden he speaks of, and says he treated Israel like his garden that he planted. So it's like he planted the man in a garden or in a special place to lock him away from all the stuff that they should not be getting into, because these other nations could not be trusted, because they probably had some form of Torah or instruction from the Most High and rejected it. The more I read, and I'm going to bring this out later some more in another video, the more I read, I'm starting to get the understanding that the Most High probably did not put any person on the planet without some form of knowledge of Torah. How can the world be made up by Torah and Torah not show its presence right away? So that means Adam had some kind of Torah or teachings or instructions to tell him how to live on the earth. So if the serpent was not a real snake, but a person, who would then mean that he was from some other kind of area or nation or land, coming into the garden to tempt with their mythological symbol of a snake, representing their religious beliefs that Adam and Eve knew nothing about. That means that there were some people living someplace else that was doing a religion that came in to bring their religious stuff into the garden to tempt Adam and Eve to worship something else. And when they bought into that worship by Eve taking of the fruit, which I can probably go a few different ways with that to show more of what I'm saying, but my video is going to be way much longer than I want it to be already. It's gone, you know. It's going to show that, I mean, there's something going on in the past that we were not told about. And we're only given limited information in Genesis, but we get more information in the rest of Old Testament, and as we look more into history and different historical writings and so on, we're finding and learning out more and more. So symbolically speaking of a serpent, right? So Now look at this now. If you go down 2 paragraphs on the same website I'm reading from, across Ireland there are hundreds of crosses. And I told you I found the cross in Canada, someplace where people hardly live. It's just like a wasteland now. And there was a cross with a serpent wrapped around it. And I'm going to show some of those kind of serpent crosses here in scripture. And you're telling me our Hebrew Messiah died to save the nation of Israel and Judah with this kind of stuff? And there's this whole issue of Moses with the serpent that I'm going to have to deal with one day, because somebody's going to argue with me about that. So I'm going to have to deal with that. And it sounds strange to me. I have to tell you that. But across Ireland, there are hundreds of crosses. And like St. Augustine said, Christianity is not a new religion, it's old, ancient, pagan religion that was rebranded in so-called New Testament times. And a book written for it called the New Testament. Right? And so, the presence of these crosses from ancient times showed you that what happened at Calvary was nothing new. But let's move on, because this is not about the New Testament series, so let me not dwell on it more. Across Ireland, there are hundreds of crosses, many of which can be proven to have pre-Christian origins. That tells you myth was there before, religion was there before, right? With these pre-Christian or ancient religions, and many of them are entwined with images of serpents, they're saying. So when you see this serpent in the garden, they're telling you something was going on that we were not properly taught about. The same is true about these kind of crosses with pre-Christian crosses, right? And so we grew up thinking that the cross was just central to Christianity and Christ. And no, the cross was there long before. I'm told that the Carthaginians, who were Africans, and we know some Israelites would have been there from what's been coming out, living among the Carthaginians, but they said that they were using crucifixion, and that the Romans learned crucifixion from the Carthaginians. So that means that the cross being used for crucifixion, although the original crucifixion symbol might not have been the T cross as we later came to know it, but might just have been a stake or something like that, right? Like a single piece of wood. But still, the cross as we know today would have been there from ancient times as well, and took on different forms. So the Romans learned it from them. So the cross is not unique to Christ, to Hebrew or pagan salvation, right? But many of these entwined crosses with images of serpents are all over the place. The same is true of other locations such as Malta, as I've just mentioned, the guy is saying here, Rhodes, India, Greece, and many more. In all these places, snakes are found on ancient megalithic monuments and Christian buildings, right? These are remnants of a pre-existent serpent-worshipping cult. The serpent cult is so often misread as consisting of solar worshippers. And they talk about esoteric and inner meaning of the sun and so on. Let me move on from that. But just to wrap up that part to show that what they're basically letting you know is that there are some ancient beliefs with people using crosses and serpents, right? And so what you find in Genesis has to be reread in light of all this information. That's been there all along. And I read it even when I was a youngster in the Christian church and later on growing up, but ignored it all. Right? So there's more stuff than what we're just finding in the pages of Genesis, right? Now, later on, this became a universal cult, right? And I've said also before on Twitter that the whole world got to a universal one world kind of government or religion at least once or twice before. You understand that if the Most High is destroying the earth with a flood in Noah's time, all flesh has corrupted their way. Why? Because they achieved some one world kind of government that used one religion like they're trying to do now today. United Nations and all, that's uniting nations, right? So if all flesh had corrupted their way, right, what you're finding is that they made everybody believe something that they should not believe about the Creator, so that they would not know the Creator anymore. They had a common belief, They might have had their variants of it in different lands and so on, but the whole world was united, right? And when you look at even how the Canaanites were living, they obviously made all their people live that way. And so as this would spread throughout the world, it would just take over, right? And then when you look at even the Tower of Babel, right? What it's telling is that they were dispersed into all different lands. Why? Because the push was to unite people at Babel in order to get everyone under one umbrella religion and one government, because one government would push one religion to unify the people. Which is what Rome was doing in Israel, was in Jerusalem, was unifying everyone under the banner of Christianity, even though Rome had many other religions. Excuse me, losing my voice here for a moment. Many other religions. They were setting up Christianity, right? And because the Hebrews did not want anything to do with this Christ crucified Messiah, who was falsely talked about in Daniel's prophecy, which I'm going to smash with style one day about this Daniel 70 weeks, because they did not want that Jesus crucified Messiah dying for your sins, because their Hebrew laws forbade them to believe and participate in such things, then they had to kill and chase out the Hebrews. Now do you understand what happened in Rome in AD 70? In Jerusalem. So as we go on now, these ancient stuff, these are not just the existence of a universal cult can also be discovered in other elements of the Irish and Celtic tradition. This is scarcely a design of ornament in Ireland from ancient times. There is scarcely a design of ornament in Ireland from ancient times that do not show the serpent or dragon image, but they just told you in the first paragraph that Ireland has no indigenous snakes. So if you're finding all this stuff, people were spreading the religion and bringing them there. This is scarcely a myth, a folktale, or a legend. There is scarcely a myth, a folktale, or a legend which does not include the serpent. This became a universal thing, and like I said, reached all the way over to Canada. And you never thought Canada had secrets, right? Man. There are not just some pagan... these are not just some pagan ornaments of myths. They also bled into the Christian world. I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I'm going to put that one in the New Testament is fake stuff to show you some stuff about the catacombs and the Christians, to show you that they were not Hebrews who were hiding out in the catacombs like that. Who did all these things in the catacombs, I should say. Or more accurately, the Christians could not keep them out. It was so deep in the Irish culture. The church had spent many years trying desperately to demonize the serpent, making the evil snake in the Garden of Eden, or even picturing Lucifer, the angel of light, as a serpent. And the reason is simple, they're saying. The knowledge is powerful, but knowledge of yourself is much more powerful. Right? So what they're saying here is that the church, because they don't want you to, because the people who set up Christianity link back to ancient peoples who were doing this stuff. They don't want you to know what was going on, right? That the serpent filled the whole earth with this religion. So, to let you know that people loved the serpent back then, so they demonized the serpent by letting you know that the serpent was Satan, so you would hate the serpent. And not focus on searching out more about the serpent. Because if you search more about the serpent, you would find out what happened in ancient times. And that there were probably other people living back then when the serpent came in. That the serpent was a teacher, or symbolic of a teacher from other religions that came in to take down. That's my thought on it, right? So to let you not dig into that, they just tell you, oh, the serpent, it was just Satan. And once you have it in your mind that it's Satan, you just stay with New Testament verses that just talk about Satan. Oh, he's just after your soul, and that's just good enough for you, because you know how to fight Satan, right? You know how to fight him. Just spread the good news of the gospel and just pray on your knees and fast and pray, and that's how you fight Satan on your knees. No, how you fight satanic stuff is studying, because this is a war of words. It's a war of words, and because they cannot destroy the people of the Most High and destroy the Israelites who are now in captivity by word, Since it's a war of words, then they resort to a war of weapons and use weapons to kill us, right? And to drive us out of our lands and so on, and scatter us in captivity, and use their sword or their weapons to hold us down. And because we're held down, the Most High said, He will gather us, right? But because they could not beat us based on a war of words, because the Most High said, don't eat it, then they in time they have to shift to using weapons, because they can't beat the people of the Most High with word, based on word. So, okay, let me leave from this website here. Now, if you look in different countries and lands, as I mentioned before, you will see all kinds of worship in different lands about snakes and snake gods, right? So what you find now, the serpents were used to make up gods. And remember, I'm talking about snake gods here, right? This is another way that people made their gods. They used the snake because they were fascinated with the movement of the snake, the stillness of it, and then the sudden strike, the sudden movement, the quickness of its movement, and so on. And in ancient times, people were mesmerized by these things. They were fascinated. And so they would use, you deal with the word animism, go look that up, right? And they believed that all these things, all these creatures had spirits in them. And if you meditated enough or ate them, or somehow got bit by them or spent time with them, you would get some of the spirit or the power that's in that animal. And so you would become like a god. That's how you have a lion god, or a god with the body of a man, the tail of some lion, the wings of a bird, and so on, right? And that's it, because they worship these animals by thinking with their own mind that the animal has powers to make it function in ways that man don't normally function. And so if you can tap into the power of the animal by acting like the animal, or meditating on it, or getting bit by it or something, then you would get some of the spirit of the animal infused into your being. That's how they made these gods. So now once they feel like this about the snake in particular, they now worship the snake, and the snake symbol becomes a symbol of their god, and they worship the snake as a god. So what they're doing in Genesis is to put their god of their religion in the book of Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, to tell you. So if there is ever an Anunnaki, it's no damn spirit being from outer space, coming from Andromeda or some other damn planet, nebula, or Pluto or Neptune or so. Their Anunnaki, their Satan, their spirits, their fallen angels would be their serpents and their other animals that they had back then. They made these gods. They looked at the stars and called them planets, and named the planets because they wondered about the creation of the Most High, but could not tap into it because they refused to learn about the Creator and to give Him praise and worship. So they looked the stars and called them planets, and worshiped the planets of how mysterious the stars are, that this ball of light could be up in the sky, that they can never reach onto it. And so by the time you get the Egyptians coming on and so on, they wonder what would it be like to reach up to the stars, just to fly with wings like a bird. So they start worshipping a bird, so that the bird spirit with wings would let them fly in the spirit one day up to the stars, many million miles away, to go, so they say it's millions of miles away, which doesn't seem proper now anyway, and to fly up to these stars. And so the Egyptian pharaohs, they die thinking that one day they're going to ascend and reach. It's all garbage, right? And so when they think these things about these gods, they think, oh, if I can just be like the serpent, then I can move fast like the serpent, and the serpent is wise, so I'll have wisdom as well. The bird can fly, so I'll get wings to fly in the spirit. And one day, if I'm diligent with my meditation enough, I'll fly physically like the bird, and so on, right? They made these gods, and they used stones to carve, and clay and wood and so on, to carve and shape the images of God's creation, of God's creatures that He made, and made images of these animals, like the snake as well, and bowed down and worshipped these animals, these birds, these snakes, and taught their children to worship them. And there you get myth, there you get gods. That's where these gods come from. That there was no flying serpent that came from outer space as Anunnaki or whatever else they want to make up and call. These are stories that men made up. And I'll prove now that this is what happened. Common sense is going to let you see what I'm saying, that this is how man actually did it. This is how they took over the knowledge of your God. And by the Hebrews getting into this kind of stuff, that's how they were taken down, right? Now, Man imagined the snake to have certain properties, sorry, to have certain things, right? It's like the fire. They look at the fire burning and they start to worship the fire, right? Because the fire has certain properties inherent in it, right? It's got heat, it's got light. And if they put their hand on it or in the fire, it burns them. Oh, the fire god burnt me because I should have reverence not to touch him. And so they start worshiping the powerful fire god. And now they have to worship a flame. So they make carvings of a flame and everybody has to worship that. They make their gods, right? So now when you deal with snake divination, there were snake masters who would worship snakes and use the snake to tell people their future, do fortune telling and so on, right? Then now this guy gets set up as a master and religious leader now and becomes powerful and begins to rule because he knows how to tell your future by what the snake does, the movement of the snake and so on, right? And so they work out a system of, if they just guess something out of their mind, because the first time they're doing this, they cannot possibly know that you're going to get, you're going to find some, let's say you're going to find some, or let's say they say something good is going to happen, like you're going to find, I don't know, some new beehive somewhere where you're going to get more honey from. Excuse me, because some honey's on their mind and whatever, or whatever reason. Or somebody told me, hey, I think there's honey over there. We saw some bees, so there must be lots of bees somewhere over there. So they hear that. So now this guy looks at a snake, and because he knows bees is in the minds of people now, and they know they're planning on going to look for beehives elsewhere over that part of the land, they expect to find it because the presence of bees, because somebody comes and said, oh, I got stung over there. There must be bees over there. Now this snake diviner looks at the bee, looks at the snake, and by a subtle movement, when he moved to the left and then jumped back up straight up with his head, he says, when he says move to the left and then straight back up with his head, means something good is going to happen. So the good thing that's in the air that they expect to find is beehives. They're going to get honey from that. So they said, you're going to find honey very soon. So now when they go to that month, they find the beehives, get honey. Everybody praise and worship the snake god. And they give a tithe or some offering to this snake diviner. He gets rich and powerful. Then he sets up some priestly caste or some temple or whatever, right? And whatever, now another religion is born. Snake religion or something, right? And so he learns now that people believe when he says something good happening, they just follow that. And so he knows, move to the left, the snake moved to the left and shot straight back up. Something happened good last time. So he likes you. Next time he comes, you have good relations with him. You give him a piece of your loaf of bread every time, so he doesn't have to go out and work. He just sits down and tells you religious lies. You're gonna give him more bread and you feel good, so he tells you something good again. The snake moved to the left and shot back up to the right. And he tells you all that stuff. They make up the movements, right? And they tell you this stuff. And then they look at the eyes of the serpent and hissing and whatever, by the way it sounds. I could hear the hiss more clearer today. Something good is going to happen. Or the hiss could not be heard properly, but the snake was hissing. Something bad is going to happen to you. Then you go out, and while you're walking, hunting with your young son who's just learning to hunt, somehow he slips and he breaks his leg. Now the snake diviner is true. He can see the future. And so everybody just learns to worship the snake. This is how this stuff happens. Right? Now, look at the stuff that they use divination for, and they made up religion out of these things. Right? They used barley to read barley, water divination to watch the flow of water, and they tell you something. They use chicken. They would cut chicken, cook chicken, eat chicken, use chicken to tell future. They read the entrails of bulls and animals. They look at the planets, the stars, the sun, the star oil, blood, fruits, flowers were used to tell the future, and so on. Moon, bones, dice, rainwater, raindrop, and if they see the rain falling and it stops right here, but not right here, I don't get what, then they all of a sudden they make a religion out of that and whatever, right? The rain god said this, the rain god whatever, the rain god is pleased with you over there, but no rain came here, so the rain god is not pleased with you. You need to offer more sacrifices and bring me half more loaf for your bread. because I'm the priest, so I get fed by you. Um, you know, so you see that man just made up gods out of these different things that they see in nature and around them. Thunder, lightning. Then you got the thunder gods. You got the Ra, and you got the Indra and Indura and all that. They look at the clouds and they make gods out of that. You look at your eyes and the eyes of animals and the howling of dogs, and they make religions out of that. They deal with wine and spirits, minerals. Paper folding was used to make religion and religious symbols. Roses, turtles were used as well, right? So they make gods and religions out of these things. People made up their religions because the Most High said there was no other gods, right? Pilomancy, by observing the patterns produced by a collection of human hair. So you throw down a collection of human hair that you cut off somebody, whether a living or dead person, and you use that to make a religion. And people were so gullible that they believe these things, and religion and myth is born out of this. Plumbermancy, by observing shapes molten lead makes when poured in water, and all of a sudden they tell your future out of that, and you're so silly you believe all this stuff, when the Bible says time and chance happens to all. Throwing of stones on the floor, and they tell you your future based on that. They're making up religion. Man made their gods because they chose not to worship the Creator. Carotard reading, crystal gazing. Old shoes was used as part of religion as well, gazing at reflective objects. See? Crazy. One verse now I'll read, and then I'll close it here, from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, and the last verse, which is verse 29. Lo, this only have I found, that the Most High hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. Upright. So now if you think of the Garden of Eden again, I said there may have been somebody else there, but then they went down on their belly, because their people refused to worship the Most High, is my guess about that story. Then they went down low, right? And the war has always been on. That's how I see it anyway. But he made man upright, and man has sought out many inventions. So if the serpent was not a real physical serpent, then it has to be somebody, because it's demons. Do demons, well, you believe demons are real. Now I'm looking into that now. It seems kind of strange to me. It seems more New Testament than anything else. But this one Satan creature, fallen angel, seems kind of strange as well, right? But if it was a person that came and tempted them in the garden, then that means that person is the one doing the evil. So that means that that person would have been upright already, and then fell because they refused to follow the Creator's instructions. So then he set up Adam and Eve. Or maybe the whole Adam and Eve story is symbolic of how the whole history of mankind started out. Who knows? There's thoughts on both sides. But so far, I think it was a real story. That's what I'm leaning to now, until I look into it further, right? Because I don't want people to think I'm just tearing on all kinds of things just like with no regard for anything, right? But I have to say that person that came into tempt would have been a person, that snake, because I showed already snakes don't do religion. They don't start religions. They don't divine and so on. So if this person came and tempted Adam and Eve in the garden, or tempted Eve, then since this says that the Most High made man upright, then that person was once upright. Could they have been from some Cushite or Ethiopian or Assyrian nation that I mentioned earlier? Could they have been from one of the trees of the garden, or the trees of the earth, the trees that were used to mention nations in the Bible? This person would have been made upright, because he's the God of all flesh and made man upright. So if he's tempting, that means he became evil at some point, because he was doing divination and looking into stuff to try to make up ways to do evil, to practice evil, and brought that evil unto Eve in the garden. And so, because he hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. And when you look at the word inventions here, it says device, invention, and then it says a contrivance, that is actual, a warlike machine. So it's telling you right away something evil, warlike, right? In other words, something bad. So he made man upright, but came into the garden and tempted to do something evil or warlike, to wage war against the Creator's words or instructions that says don't eat from this tree. And it's telling you that this word comes from another word that's saying to think, to plan, to esteem, to calculate, to invent, make a judgment, to imagine, to count. And I'm telling you, people made their gods, like snake gods and other animal gods from ancient times, by imagining these things about the animals, and then they made statues about these imaginations. For all the thoughts and imaginations of men's hearts only evil continually. They imagined these serpents and animals to be gods and worshipped them. But because there were no actual gods, like Anunnaki and so on, then they imagined that and made statues to let people worship them. Because when you rule over people, you make them do whatever you want. Right? So if it's saying that he made man upright, but then man sought inventions to do evil, what it's saying is that he made man upright, but then man went down on his belly. That needs to be cleared up, I know. But he made man upright, and man did evil inventions, or man began to think and plan and calculate to do evil, to make judgments about things that the Creator didn't tell them to make judgments about, and to imagine things and to do evil things. He made man upright, and they did, just like Adam and Eve were upright, but then they did some evil when they took from the tree. Right? So the serpent in the garden was not a real snake, but somebody came in who had already began to practice evil and divination from a religion that was dealing with some kind of divination, right? And wizardry and so on, and came in and did evil. Man made their gods. There were no gods. Man made them up with their own minds. Crescent moon, made up. Cross, made up. Serpent religion, made up. Persian gods, made up. Roman gods, made up. Greek gods, made up. Made up. The Most High says He's the only God. All these gods are just thoughts and imaginations of men's minds. So now you know that from the earliest ancient times, there was only the Most High. And what they are not telling us is that man who was made upright, like I just read from the scripture, pulled away from the Creator and decided not to worship Him anymore, because with the power of the mind that the Creator gave him, he imagined evil things and started to practice those evil things and broke from the Creator. And then the story comes in and says the Most High is trying to correct things and made man, place him in a garden, and evil people came in to take down the righteous.